Well, it's Tuesday, and we're still doing scales and gauges.
Oh my gosh, you washed your car and it shrunk.
It does look very familiar, doesn't it?
What'd you do?
It's parked right over there. We're comparing 25th scale cars to 24th scale cars, and for you train people, you're going, that's not a train. Trust me, you need to understand why some of the model car companies did 24th scale, some of them did 25th scale. If you're really going to understand our next section of videos, HO scale.
No, they made it that scale because people like me like to go, play with cars still.
Yeah, and say ho, ho, ho. That's where the HO came from. It was a Christmas thing. No, anyway, we will be talking about HO. But we already talked a little bit about the manufacturing process whereby trains are made. I'm going to attempt to put a link to that. Doors work. It's a good model. It's a darn good model. Let's see, it has the right engine and everything. Anyway, we digress. Why in the world did some of the manufacturers of plastic model cars do them in 1/24th scale? And why did some of them do them in 1/25th scale? And I've had all kinds of friends who build model cars say, well, I can just see the difference. If you've got a 100-inch car, 100-inch long car, and it's in 1/25th scale, that's 4 inches, right? That's pretty simple math. But if you model the same car in 24th scale, it grows a little bit because the scale just shrunk, which makes the thing bigger by exactly 1.6666 on infinitum inches longer. 0.16. I mean, what are we talking? Let's go metric because I can't even figure the fraction. 2 millimeters?
That's pretty small.
It's pretty small.
The ruler out, but yeah.
And no, I don't think you could actually see the difference between a 24th and a 25th scale car. Why? Why did they do that? And what in the heck does that have to do with HO trains? Okay, so we talked in an earlier video, which I've already put a link to, on how these models were made. And back in the early olden days, before there were CAD softwares and 3D printers and CNC milling machines and so on, in order to make a mold, to make a model with, you had to do a production model. And that production model was made, well, it was made quite large. Okay, that's quite large. They were generally made in 1/8 scale. 1/8 scale. Why? Well, because they wanted to produce a 1/24th scale model. And back the technique that they would use is they used a milling machine called a reduction pantograph. If you made the prototype model, the master model in 1/8 scale, then you could pantograph that down by half to 1/16th scale. You could pantograph that down by double to 1/32nd scale, by 1.5 to 1/24th scale. And if these scales all sound familiar because cars were offered in that, it's because the pattern work was all being done in 1/8 scale. And then they could do the molds in 8th scale, do it full size, 16th scale, 12th scale, 24th scale, 32nd scale, 64th scale. And that's why all these scales kind of work that way, because they're using the reduction pantograph. So why 1/25th scale?
To throw us for a loop.
Well, and I wondered that for the longest time, and finally, and Jim Keeler's getting some wonderful documentation for us. And we've done a show, try to put a link here to Jim Keeler, but he worked at Revell and did a lot of this production work and pre-production work and that sort of thing. Well, when they were making those big master models in 1/8 scale, they're getting all of the measurements from the car manufacturers in full size. So it just says, okay, the wheelbase is, I don't know, 72 inches or something. And they're just getting all of these numbers directly off the plans. And then they're using that to develop the 1/8 scale model. But people who know drafting know that they didn't draw the drawings in 1/8 scale. They drew the drawings in 1/10 scale.
Oh my gosh.
So all of the dimensions written on the drawings are full size, but the pictures in the drawings themselves are 1/10 scale. And so some of the manufacturers said it'd be a heck of a lot easier to do the master model in 1/10 scale. It's not that much different than 1/8 scale. And they weren't planning to do a 1/8 scale version, but now their scales are all going to be locked into 1/10 scale. So they're going to be 1/20th scale.
Ooh.
And then when they go to 2.5 times, they hit 1/25th scale. So the people who did their prototyping in 1/10th scale produced 1/25th scale models. The people who did their patterns in 1/8 scale produced 1/24th scale models. Interesting, right?
Very.
Yeah. What does that have to do with HO? Well, we sort of explained earlier that the pattern work for HO was all done in 1/29th scale. And that seems like a random thing, but that's because they had decided to change the scale of, quote, half O scale to 1/87th scale to correct that gauge problem that we've talked so much about and make the gauge correct. So they, in the very early days, said it will be 1/87th. That made the prototype sizes, the mastering sizes 1/29th. This is all stuff that we'll get into when we dive into HO. But I just thought it's very interesting to see how that has worked throughout the industry to create 1/24th scale and 1/25th scale cars because of the technique they were using. Of course, today, they just feed all the full scale numbers into the computer using CAD software, and then they tell the 3D printer to print it out in whatever scale they want. And then when they think they've got something that they want, they tell the CNC milling machine to make the molds in that size, and out it comes. But they're still using the same scales because those are the established scales. Because those scales date back to the 1920s and so on.
Wow.
Interesting,
It
right?
is very interesting.
Anyway, this answers the age-old question, why did some of the early car manufacturers do their models in this scale right here, 1/24th scale, and why did some of them do just slightly smaller 1/25th scale?
Either way, they really look nice on a shelf.
Don't they just?
Yeah, and there's this thing called a collection. You can put it in there.
Well, moreover, when you're a kid building these in 1962, you put it on the shelf and then you just sit there going, someday I'm going to have that car.
Yes. You know what? This thing even has instrumentation on it.
It does. It's a great model.
Wow.
Yeah.
I could climb in there and take it for a ride.
You can't actually start it, but it's close. It's close.
Oh, there's a key in the ignition.
We digress.
So
Anyway, we hope this wasn't too terribly droll, because it's a little bit droll, and it's car stuff, and I know some of you people going, if it isn't a train. But it's very interesting to understand scales and gauges, and scales in this case, because there's no gauge to a car. Anyway, there it is.
We'll be covering airplanes next week, so pay attention.
Yes, the
Planes,
B-24.
Planes, trains, and automobiles.
Well, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please subscribe. And if you need to subscribe, the easy way to do that is with the upcoming blue button. Are we ready for it? Zoink!
Right there.
Right there, the blue button. But we're not sure how you found this silliness on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here on Sunday. We'll see you then.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.